Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Professor Sides, and this course is Principles of Microeconomics. We are in Chapter 5, Elasticity and its Applications. In this segment of the lecture, we're going to talk about price elasticity determinants. When we talk about the determinants of price elasticity, we first need to understand what is, we've talked about what is elasticity, but we need to talk about its measurements and how we express them once we have the measurements. Demand is either elastic or it's inelastic. If it is elastic, the demand for a good is elastic, then we know that the consumers are going to dramatically or drastically respond to a change in price. So if the price changes by a little, the response is going to be huge, and it will be represented by a high number. So if we do the calculations, which is in another lecture, and the end number is a high number, then we can say with certainty, or as much certainty as possible, that the demand for that item is said to be elastic, because the response was dramatic. A small change in the price caused a dramatic change in response quantitatively. And then we'll talk about the qualitative aspects, the positive or the negative, later. A demand for a good or service is said to be inelastic. Remember, we said demand is either elastic or inelastic. It is said to be inelastic if a small change in price causes a slight response, meaning if we were doing the calculations and the number is low, then that good or service is said to be inelastic, meaning that the consumers did not respond dramatically to a change in price. And what we can conclude or infer is that if the price is a dramatic change, it might not be a normal good. It might be something that we call a luxury good. And if the response is slight, that might be more of a normal good. That's not a hard and fast rule, but it is something that you can consider as an inference when you're looking at the numbers, which is in another lecture. Now let's talk about what influences, those factors that influence the elasticity to be either elastic or inelastic. The first factor that would influence a response is called the availability of close substitutes. Remember in Chapter 4, we talked about demand curve shifts, and one of the variables that would cause the demand curve to shift would be the change in price of a related good, and the related good being either a complement or a substitute. Well, we're going to revisit that again here in Chapter 5, because what we will find is that if a good or service has a close substitute, then that response is going to be more elastic, meaning more dramatic, meaning the number is going to be higher when we calculate it, because that means the consumer can switch from one to the other. If, however, a change in price causes very little change or very little response, that number is going to be low, because the consumer is not going to be able to switch between goods and services. So for example, the examples that I'm going to list here is breakfast cereal versus sunscreen. When we look at breakfast cereal, whether you get Kellogg's or Big G or store brand, or I'm at a loss now. Generic, that's the one I'm looking for. So Rice Krispies is Rice Krispies is Rice Krispies is Rice Krispies, whether it's generic, store brand, Kellogg's, or Big G. Rice cereal can be substituted for oat cereal, could be substituted for corn-based cereal, could be substituted for eggs, bacon, and biscuits, could be substituted for croissant, could be substituted for something else, cold pizza the morning after. So because breakfast cereal has so many different substitutes, if there's a change in price for one particular brand of cereal, then you will find that the elasticity is going to be higher because the consumer can switch. There are enough close substitutes for the consumer to switch. Conversely, on sunscreen, there aren't that many other products that you can use to protect your skin from the sun. And yes, Black people can use sunscreen. And so, in fact, we encourage you, yes, there's more melanin in your skin, but you need the protection from the sun anyway. And so, since there's very little substitutes for sunscreen, if we have a small change in the price of sunscreen, you're going to go ahead and buy it anyway because you can't substitute it for anything else. Now, I've heard stories about people using baby oil and olive oil and whatever. I'm not sure about all of that. All I know is that when you buy sunscreen to protect your skin from the damaging rays of the sun, if that price change because there's not many substitutes for sunscreen, we would say that that particular product is relatively inelastic because there's no close substitutes. So again, the first factor that would influence price elasticity of demand is the availability of close substitutes. The second example of the second factor that determines price elasticity is the market definition. The market, how the market defines that good or service. If the product is narrowly defined, for example, blue jeans, we will find that it is more elastic because there are more substitutes. So if the price of jeans go up, then if you are a lady, you can wear slacks, you can wear skirts, you can wear shorts, you can wear skirts, you can wear leggings. I would not encourage that, ladies, outside of the house. You could wear pajama bottoms. You can wear just about anything other than jeans. You can wear khakis if you want to. But there's enough substitutes so that if you had a slight change or increase in the price of jeans, you could switch to something else. However, if the product is broadly defined by the market, for example, clothing, then what you will find is that if there's a change in the price of clothing in general, then you'll find that it is more inelastic because there's less substitutes. Now, I know that there are some artists who would say, well, let's just use body paint. Let's use, we can take some rubber byproducts and create our clothing from, rubber byproducts. I know that in Las Vegas, when they were doing the tech conference, they were talking about, using technology, to embed in technology in your clothing. All of that's well, fine and good, but by and large, there's no substitutes for clothing. There's substitutes for jeans, more substitutes for jeans than there are for clothing. And so since there's more substitutes for jeans than clothing, then we would say that clothing, because it's so broadly defined, is more inelastic than jeans because there's very few substitutes for clothing. And again, this is the second factor that would determine price elasticity, and that's called market definition. The third factor the third factor that determines price elasticity is necessity versus luxury. Necessity versus luxury. And this is completely, solely, entirely dependent upon a buyer's preference. Remember chapter 4, demand curve shift, change in taste or preference. We revisit that here. That taste or preference is what determines whether a good or service is a luxury or a necessity. What you consider a luxury, I might consider a necessity. What I consider a luxury, you might consider a necessity. Ladies, you may consider necessity to go to the hair store and buy bags of hair in order to present a certain look, whereas I, at my age, would not think that that is necessarily a necessity, more so a luxury. It is strictly based on the individual's preference. Fellas, having multiple pairs of tennis shoes might be a necessity because, of course, you know, you need to wear these particular kicks with this outfit, or you know, you have your court shoes, you have your, you know, club shoes, and you have your walk around, you know, shoes, and then you have your hang out at the house shoes. All of that is all well, fine and good. From my standpoint, I just need a pair to work out in. Doesn't matter what kind they are, as long as they provide me the necessary support. So what one individual would consider a necessity, another individual would consider a luxury. And the examples that we're going to use is insulin versus Caribbean cruise. Now, of course, this example is on the extreme. But again, we're using this because it is an extreme to help further illustrate the difference between necessity and luxury. And even in this instance, if I am not a diabetic, insulin is not a necessity for me. The Caribbean cruise might be a necessity for me, but not the insulin. If, however, that would be an instance where insulin could be, because of my preferences, insulin would not be a necessity, the Caribbean cruise may very well be. And again, it is solely dependent upon the buyer's preference. And what you will find here is that necessities, no matter what they are, whatever the consumer perceives as the necessity, then that consumer will find that the necessities are more inelastic, meaning they will have a lower number, and the luxuries are more elastic, which means they have a higher number. So when you're doing your calculations and the number is low, then that's a necessity, and that is inelastic. That product or service is inelastic, which means that even if the price goes up, you're going to see little response, little change in response. I want to keep buying it because it's a necessity. I've got to have it. As opposed to a luxury, I'm less likely to buy it. So that means my response is going to be dramatic, and so which means I'm not going to buy it. And again, the third example is necessity versus luxury as a determinant of price elasticity. The fourth and final determinant of price elasticity is just time. There is a quote that says, "Time heals all wounds." I am going to tell you from an economic standpoint, time heals all elasticities. And what we will find is that the more time is given, the more elastic the demand. And that is because as you have more time, you can adjust and adapt. For example, the current price for gas is, depending upon where you go, somewhere between $3 and $3.29 a gallon. If within 24 hours, the gas price goes from $3 to $10, then we would say for some people that would be gas is elastic. And so what we would see is that would mean that the price elasticity for demand for them is a high number. And so then they're going to choose alternatives. They're going to carpool. They're going to use public transportation. Some might have a bike, get a bike, or walk to wherever they need to go. However, for others, it is a necessity. And even though the price jumped, they're going to still pay it because they still need the gas to get to where they need to go. That's if the price changed within 24 hours. If, however, the price increases from $3 to $10 over the course of a year or more, then that gives the consumer time to adapt. So if the price goes from $3 to $3.30 to $3.60 to $4 to $4.50, over time we're going to adjust and adapt. And in the short run, what you will find is that the price is inelastic, meaning you're going to complain about it as you pump the gas in your car. However, you'll still pay the price because it is inelastic. And going back to factor number 3, you view it as a necessity, not a luxury. This concludes this segment of the lecture. We've done our introduction. Now we've just completed or concluded with the determinants of price elasticity. The next lecture will go over how to calculate elasticity. That's the more technical piece. And so I'm going to encourage you to pay close attention to the lecture and then go back and revisit what's in your book. I look forward to speaking to you soon. Have a good one.